stops explaining. He stops chasing, stops trying to prove he's worthy of love that constantly makes him question himself. You won't hear him argue. You won't see a dramatic goodbye. He'll simply withdraw, quietly, peacefully, and completely. Not because he stopped caring, but because he finally realized that his silence protects what his words never could: his peace, his self-respect, and his sanity. Number 1. Emotional burnout. There's a kind of exhaustion men rarely talk about, the kind that doesn't come from physical work, but from emotional overextension. It's the quiet fatigue that builds when a man keeps giving his heart, his patience, and his consistency, only to feel like none of it is ever enough. He's not tired because he's weak. He's tired because he's been trying to meet expectations that constantly move. He's tired of being misunderstood, of being told to do more, be better, communicate more, while his own needs are quietly brushed aside. This kind of emotional burnout doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, through small disappointments, through moments when his effort is taken for granted, through arguments where his intentions are twisted into flaws. Most men don't express this kind of exhaustion out loud. They internalize it because society tells them that to complain is to be ungrateful, that to feel drained is to be less masculine. So they carry the weight in silence, smiling through moments that don't feel good anymore, pretending to be strong while feeling invisible. They start suppressing emotions, not because they don't feel, but because they've learned that expressing them often leads to judgment or dismissal. Every time he opens up and gets met with criticism or indifference, a part of him retreats further into silence. He begins to protect his peace by withdrawing his emotional presence, by choosing quiet over confrontation, and by appearing distant instead of desperate for understanding. Emotional burnout in men often comes from one-sided emotional labor. It's when he's the one always checking in, always trying to fix, always being the steady one while his emotional world is neglected. It's when he listens to her pain, absorbs it, and tries to make it better. But when he speaks about his, the room goes quiet. This imbalance drains him of his natural vitality. The very energy he once used to nurture, support, and love becomes heavy. He starts losing the desire to connect because every attempt feels like a transaction where he gives and gets nothing real in return. The small moments of neglect, the dismissive tone, the lack of appreciation, the constant criticism pile up until even his affection feels forced, mechanical, like something he does out of duty, not desire. Over time, this emotional exhaustion doesn't just affect his relationship, it seeps into his identity. He starts doubting himself, wondering if he's the problem. He replays moments in his head, asking if he could have loved differently, if he should have stayed quieter, or if maybe caring less would have hurt less. But the truth is, he's not broken. He's drained. He's depleted from giving too much of himself to situations that only took from him. He's worn down by carrying emotional responsibilities that were never shared equally. And while he may not say it, while he may still smile, still show up, and still act composed, inside he's slowly burning out. Not because he stopped loving, but because he's realized that love shouldn't require him to abandon himself just to feel seen. Number 2, unreciprocated investment. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes he's been pouring himself into a relationship that gives him almost nothing back. Not material things, but emotional energy, understanding, effort. He's been showing up, being consistent, doing the small things that matter, but deep down, he knows the energy isn't mutual. It's the kind of realization that doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, through countless unnoticed gestures, unanswered messages, and emotionally one-sided conversations. He starts to see that no matter how much he gives, his attention, his loyalty, his affection, it never seems to fill the gap. He begins to feel like he's giving love to someone who only knows how to take, not reciprocate. This kind of imbalance leaves a deep mark. Men might not always express it, but they feel it. They notice when the effort isn't matched, when their consistency is mistaken for obligation, when appreciation is replaced by expectation. At first, he tells himself it's temporary, that maybe she's just busy, distracted, or going through something. He keeps giving, hoping his love will be enough to spark hers in return. But as time passes, he starts realizing that his care has become the background noise of her comfort. She's grown used to his effort. It's no longer special, it's routine. And that's when the slow erosion begins, not of the relationship, but of his emotional investment. Unreciprocated investment isn't always loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It's him sitting in silence after another day of giving more than he receives. It's him remembering the times he planned surprises, made sacrifices, or stayed up to listen, and realizing how rarely she ever did the same. It's the sinking feeling of being emotionally invisible while still being physically present. This imbalance teaches him something painful about love, that sometimes people don't value what they don't have to earn. His loyalty becomes expected, not admired. His presence becomes convenient, not cherished. And once a man starts feeling that way, something inside him begins to shut down. He begins to withdraw, not out of anger, but out of quiet realization. He stops chasing emotional validation. He stops over-explaining his worth. He learns that love can't be sustained by one person's energy alone. The same man who once went out of his way to make things better now starts creating distance to protect what's left of his peace. It's not revenge, it's self-preservation. The giving slows down. The good morning texts stop feeling natural. The effort to fix things fades. Not because he stopped loving, but because he finally understands that love without reciprocity becomes self-destruction. The relationship starts to feel like a job where only one person shows up, where effort is taken as proof of duty, not devotion. And when he finally steps back, not with bitterness, but with quiet acceptance, it's not a sudden decision. It's the final chapter of a story where he kept giving long after the other person stopped noticing. Number 3, loss of masculine respect. There's a silent pain that men carry when they feel their masculinity is no longer respected, not in the sense of dominance or control, but in the way they are seen, valued, and appreciated for what they bring into a relationship. Respect is oxygen for a man. Without it, love starts to feel suffocating. When a man feels dismissed, talked down to, or constantly corrected, something within him begins to fade. It's not about pride, it's about recognition. He doesn't want to be worshipped. He just wants to be acknowledged for what he provides, his protection, his effort, his consistency, his presence. But when those things go unnoticed, or worse, are ridiculed, he starts to feel unnecessary. That's where the slow breakdown begins. At first, he might brush it off. Maybe she's stressed, maybe she didn't mean it that way, maybe he's overthinking, but it keeps happening. The sarcasm, the comparisons, the subtle digs that tell him he's not doing enough, not strong enough, not emotional enough, not man enough. What she calls jokes start chipping away at his sense of worth. What she calls feedback starts sounding like rejection. A man doesn't need to be praised every day, but he does need to feel respected in his role. He needs to know that his voice matters, that his decisions are trusted, that his efforts are seen. When that disappears, he begins to question his place in the relationship. A man who feels disrespected doesn't explode. He disconnects. He withdraws from arguments because he's tired of feeling unheard. He stops offering ideas because they're always met with criticism. He stops expressing feelings because every time he does, they're twisted or mocked. The relationship slowly shifts from partnership to power struggle, where he's no longer seen as a teammate, but as someone to correct or compete with. Respect is replaced by resistance. Admiration turns into irritation, and the emotional safety he once felt begins to vanish. This erosion isn't visible at first, but it's powerful. It turns love into obligation and passion into politeness. When a man feels his masculinity isn't respected, he starts questioning everything: his purpose in the relationship, his ability to lead, his very sense of manhood. And that kind of wound goes deep because it's not just about how she treats him, it's about how he begins to see himself through her eyes. He feels stripped of the role he was naturally built to play: the provider, the protector, the anchor. When those qualities are dismissed or devalued, he starts to pull away, not just from her, but from himself. The emotional bond weakens because respect is the foundation of attraction. Without it, even love loses its meaning. It's clarity. He's not cold. He's just done being pulled into emotional storms that lead nowhere. Every man reaches a moment where he looks around and realizes that peace feels like freedom, silence feels like healing, and solitude feels like sanity. He's no longer interested in proving a point or fighting for a connection that feels forced. Instead of chasing constant emotional intensity, he begins to value simplicity, calm conversations, mutual understanding, and consistency. The same man who once fought hard to keep the relationship together now finds strength in letting go of what disturbs his inner balance. Drama in relationships often comes from emotional immaturity, from people who need chaos to feel alive. But a man who's grown through disappointment learns that peace is the real form of love. He learns that real connection doesn't need to be loud, unpredictable, or full of tension. It should bring calm, not anxiety. He starts to notice how often arguments are born from ego, how often they circle around the same issues, and how rarely they lead to growth. He stops trying to be understood by someone who listens only to respond. He stops chasing resolution with someone who thrives on conflict. In choosing peace, he chooses to protect his emotional energy because he finally understands that not every battle deserves his participation. When a man prioritizes peace, people around him often mistake it for emotional distance. But it's not distance, it's wisdom. He's learned that love cannot thrive in chaos, and that sometimes silence says more than any argument ever could. He no longer needs to defend his worth in loud conversations that go in circles. He's done with emotional manipulation disguised as passion. He's done being guilt-tripped for wanting calm instead of confrontation. The peace he chooses isn't just about avoiding drama, it's about healing from it. He's not walking away from love, he's walking toward a version of it that doesn't hurt. He understands now that peace isn't the absence of emotion, it's the presence of emotional maturity. And once a man tastes that kind of peace, drama no longer feels like love. Number 5, emotional safety is rare. For most men, emotional safety isn't something they talk about, but it's something they crave more deeply than they admit. It's the quiet comfort of knowing that when they open up, they won't be judged, mocked, or made to feel weak. It's the feeling of being understood without having to explain every word, of being accepted in moments of silence just as much as in moments of strength. But in today's world, that kind of safety has become rare. Too often, when a man shows his softer side, it's met with criticism or used against him later. He learns that his honesty can be twisted, his tears can be weaponized, and his vulnerability can be labeled as insecurity. So he builds walls, not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much and doesn't trust that his emotions will be handled with care. Men grow up being told to man up, to stay strong, to never let emotions control them. That conditioning teaches them to suppress rather than express, to hide pain rather than heal from it. When they finally do try to open up, they often find that the world isn't as safe as they hoped. Some women say they want a man who's emotionally available, but when he finally reveals his fears or insecurities, they pull away or lose respect for him. This contradiction leaves him confused. He's told to be vulnerable, but punished when he is. Over time, he learns that silence feels safer than sincerity. He stops sharing his inner world because the risk of misunderstanding feels greater than the relief of being known. Emotional safety, for a man, is found in rare spaces. In conversations where he isn't interrupted, in moments where his emotions are met with empathy rather than analysis. It's when he can speak without fearing that his words will later be thrown back at him in anger. It's when he can admit he's struggling without being seen as unstable or less capable. Men might not ask for reassurance directly, but they seek it in the tone of her voice, in how she listens, in whether she truly hears him or just waits for her turn to respond. When that safety doesn't exist, he begins to retreat, not out of coldness, but out of self-preservation. His silence becomes his shield, and his emotional distance becomes his only form of protection. What many fail to understand is that emotional safety is what keeps a man connected. Without it, even love feels dangerous. He may stay physically present, but emotionally, he's miles away. He'll still care, still provide, still do what's expected of him. But the deeper connection, the raw truth of who he is, stays locked behind quiet eyes. When a man says less, it's not because he has nothing to say, it's because he no longer believes it's safe to say it. That's the tragedy of emotional unsafety. It teaches him that peace is found in silence, not in connection. And once he learns that lesson, he stops looking for love that feels loud and starts seeking love that feels safe. Number 6, self-rediscovery. There comes a stage in a man's life when he looks at everything he has poured himself into, the relationships, the effort, the endless giving, and realizes somewhere along the way he lost himself. He became so focused on being enough for everyone else that he forgot what made him feel alive. He adjusted, compromised, and bent over backward to keep others happy, often at the cost of his own peace. But there's a quiet awakening that happens when a man grows tired of being everything for everyone but nothing for himself. It's not sudden. It happens in still moments when he catches himself feeling disconnected from who he used to be. The things that once excited him no longer do. The version of himself that was confident, grounded, and full of direction feels like a stranger. That realization, though painful, becomes the beginning of self-rediscovery. In this stage, he starts pulling back from the noise. He stops chasing validation and starts craving clarity. He begins to see that he was never truly lost. He was buried under expectations, under pressure to provide, to perform, to always stay strong. Self-rediscovery is when he starts peeling back those layers one by one. He stops asking what people want from him and starts asking what he wants for himself. He reconnects with the parts of him that were silenced, the dreams he abandoned, the hobbies he ignored, the emotions he hid. He remembers that before he was someone's partner, someone's provider, or someone's emotional support, he was a person with his own identity, desires, and vision. And he begins to rebuild that connection, quietly but intentionally. This process isn't glamorous. It's not a sudden transformation or a dramatic change. It's slow, often lonely, and deeply introspective. He spends more time alone, not because he's avoiding people, but because solitude starts to feel like home. In that silence, he begins to understand his worth without needing external reassurance. He starts taking care of himself, physically, mentally, emotionally, not as an act of selfishness, but as an act of recovery. He realizes that being a man doesn't mean being constantly available to fix everyone else's problems. It means learning to stand firm in his truth and protecting his peace without guilt. He becomes more selective with his energy, more intentional with his time, and more cautious with who he gives his heart to. As he rediscovers himself, he begins to see relationships differently. He no longer seeks love to fill a void, but to complement his growth. He stops settling for situations that drain him and starts choosing people who bring calm, not chaos. Self-rediscovery teaches him that love should never cost him his identity. He starts finding beauty in his solitude, strength in his stillness, and confidence in his boundaries. He becomes the man he was always meant to be, not shaped by expectations or broken by disappointment, but rebuilt by awareness and peace. And though he may walk away from what once defined him, he's not walking away empty. He's